What up, and here, the movie brother, what's good? Hey, today I'm introducing a gentleman by the name of Matt Birkbeck. Matt is a very accomplished investigative journalist as well as author, and he wrote a book in 2008 called Deconstructing Sammy that really digs into the life of the late, great Sammy Davis Jr. But that's just one piece of it. There's a lot more going on that I don't want to give it away. One thing that really stood out for me in this book that made me want to interview Matt was that it reads like a screenplay. And I mean, I'm a film critic, so I'm biased, right? I love film. So to read a book that, reads like a film, I mean, that's the best of both worlds. So I hope you enjoy the conversation that he and I had as much as I did. Matt's doing a lot of great things, so stay tuned in 2021. That's what it is. I'm Ant, the movie brother. This is the place, the one and only place where I bring you nothing but the real on the real. Peace. Man, let's get into this thing and talk about deconstructing Sammy. So, for those that don't know, I mean, how did this project even come about?
So I knew the story is about, it's not a bio on Sammy Davis Jr. It tells the story of Sammy, but it tells the story through an investigation. And it was an investigation that was conducted in the 1990s into the early 2000s by a fellow by the name of Albert Sonny Murray. And he's a former United States attorney in Pennsylvania. And his family, his parents they were the proprietors of what had been the first Black-owned resort in the Poconos in Eastern Pennsylvania since like the 1950s. They've got this amazing history. And so Sonny and I used to have breakfast. I had known him from my days as a newspaper reporter. And he told me once that he had represented the Sammy Davis Jr. estate. And, he filled me in on a couple of things, but he said to me once, he said, Sammy knows the story of the Kennedy assassination. And I was floored. I said, well, how does Sammy Davis Jr. know that? And he couldn't tell me, he said. But I was intrigued. So I did my first book in 2002. I did my second book, A Beautiful Child, in 2004. And I finally convinced Sonny to tell me his story. And it took me, that's how I got into it. And from 2000, I'd say late 2004, actually, no, it was a little bit later than that. It was probably around 06 that I really started diving into it. And it was an incredible story. In which you basically tell the story of Sammy Davis Jr. and how he ended up dying $15 million in debt, owed half of that to the IRS, and because of that debt, and they owned his name and his likeness, you never heard about Sammy again following his death in 1990.
Title, Deconstructing Sammy. Now I know you've written this some time ago, but any particular reason why why you chose, or you guys chose that title?
So one of the things that's important to me in telling a story is that there has to be multiple facets to it. It has to be complex. It has to be obviously of interest to me. I also need to come up with a pretty good title, something that's really representative of the book. And to me, Deconstructing Sammy was perfect because that's exactly what Sonny did. So Sammy's wife, Altovise, who he had been married to for the last 20 years or so of his life. It was his third wife. The reason why Sonny knew her is because she ended up, following Sammy's death, living in poverty on the grounds of the Hillside Inn, which was the resort owned by Sonny's parents. And she was living with an old family friend, and she was broke. She was an alcoholic. And the old family friend asked Sonny if he could represent her and try to get her out of this mess that Sammy had left her in with all these debts. In order to do that, Sonny had to basically understand Sammy's life. Like, how did Sammy get into such debt and despair? And so basically he had to deconstruct his life. And so I thought to myself, that's a perfect title, Deconstructing Sammy.
We know that unfortunately, Mr. Davis died in debt, in a significant amount of debt. And so I want to spend some time talking about, his financial situation and, get your thoughts on this. So do you think Sammy Davis Jr. was fiscally irresponsible, or, was he a generous person who just loved life? And You know, it was just literally, maybe it was just one of his love languages to give the way that he gave throughout his life.
I think it's probably a combination of both. You know, you're talking about a man that made millions during the course of his life. You know, he play in Las Vegas and he get paid, you know, 250 grand to perform. So yes, he spent money like water. But he also thought at the same time he had trusted certain individuals that he shouldn't have trusted, which is basically a familiar story with many people in Hollywood. You know, you trust certain people, you think that you're putting your money into something relatively safe, and then you find out and it's all gone. And for Sammy, while he did spend wildly, and that's well known, what wasn't well known, what I discovered in doing this book, you know, Sonny had basically laid the trail for me in terms of what he did. You know, but it was up to me to basically like connect a lot of these dots and to go further into, you know, I saw all these mob connections, you know, going back to the 1950s. So when he first met Frank Sinatra, it was Frank Sinatra that introduced him to his first attorney, Sammy's first attorney, and he was a mob guy. And you follow this trail and the mob's hold on the entertainment industry, and to Sammy, to the day Sammy died, he was still beholden to them, and that's how he ended up basically falling into such debt, in that he made investments that were shown to him by, you know, certain individuals that were, I mean, on the surface, they were just ridiculous scams. Like one I described in the book where he's buying shares in a Kentucky coal company in which they were going to take coal and put it in 10-pound bags and sell it across the country. Nobody buys lumps of coal like that, which was ridiculous.
Right.
But what happened was these mob guys, they were using, what their real intent was to use Sammy's name to entice investors into these bogus deals, and then they would just scam everybody. So unfortunately for Sammy, he had used them as tax shelters, and the IRS denied them. That's what left them in debt. But it was a combination of someone who just enjoyed life, enjoyed everything that life had to offer, and then some, you know, but also just being in bed with some really bad people.
Yeah,